Start with Mr. Dehejia, please, for opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was last year before this committee last fall, I had warned that Canada stood at a crossroads. That is as true now as it was then. If anything, there's greater urgency to fix the problems that ail us. GDP growth per capita, the basic measure of the well-being of the average Canadian, is stagnating. GDP per person is basically where it was a decade ago. In other words, we've had a lost decade here in Canada. In 1960, our average income per person was the same as the US. Now we have less than 3/4 the income per person south of the border. Unemployment in Canada, when I wrote these notes, I said it's just below. Now we're actually above 6%, 6.1%, and could go to 7% or higher. In the US, it's below 4%. US growth and productivity continue to be strong. Ours in Canada seem to have flatlined. What's driving this increasing divergence between the US and Canada, making us significantly poorer than our friends south of the border? A key driver is investment. It's a key driver of growth in income productivity. In the late 1990s, gross fixed capital formation, just a fancy word for investment, as a share of GDP was about 7%. Today it's down to about 3%. In 2013, gross fixed capital formation per worker in Canada was about 90% of the US. We're now down to 2/3 of the US. Why is this happening? Put simply, increased government spending is crowding out private investment. Government now accounts for about 1/4 of Canada's GDP. It's staggering. Think about that. 1/4 of our economy is socialized. Well, total business investment is now only 8%. No wonder that the latest numbers show that labor productivity in Canada shrank by more than 0.5 percentage point last quarter, while in the US it grew by 2.5% approximately. We are in serious trouble. But don't take my word on it. Recently, Bank of Canada Senior Deputy Governor Carolyn Rogers went so far as to say that low productivity growth in Canada is, quote, an emergency, and, quote, it's time to break the glass. Of course, the Bank of Canada has also done its share to add to our current woes. As I've testified previously before this committee, the pandemic saw explosive growth in the money supply as the central bank monetized fiscal deficits, financed by sovereign debt, in other words, quantitative easing. That is what gave us the inflation crisis and now cripplingly high interest rates that are making life impossibly difficult for many Canadians. What's to be done? As I testified last fall, we need to go back to basics. The 3 pillars of economic policy are fiscal policy, monetary policy, and regulation. They're all badly in need of repair. We've had a fiscal binge in Canada. Monetary policy likewise has been on the bender. The economy is overregulated, stifling innovation, new business creation, private sector investment, and creating high entry barriers for new entrants. As a consequence, our economy is highly concentrated with a handful of dominant, politically powerful, and entrenched incumbent firms in all major sectors, everything from cell phone services to groceries to legacy media to banking to airlines, you name it. With such heavy concentration and lack of competition, it's no wonder that we pay higher prices and get poorer service than our friends in the US for just about everything. And just to finish, it's time to cure ourselves of the addiction to fiscal and monetary excesses and take a chainsaw to burdensome regulation, to paraphrase the new president of Argentina. It's worth recalling that at the beginning of the 20th century, Argentina had about the same per capita income as the US and Canada. But after 120 years of economic mismanagement, their income is now only 1/3 that of the US. And as I said, ours is now actually less than 3/4. Unless we mend our ways, we risk going the way of Argentina. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dehejia. And now we'll hear from Ms. Dearden, please.